Without further ado, it's 10:30 on a Wednesday. That means we are joined by our good buddy Tyson Alger of the I-5 Corridor. Lookout Eugene Springfield. Tyson, good morning. How was your weekend?
I had a pretty great time in Iowa, guys. I mean, it was the first time being coming from the West Coast that I've ever experienced cold weather or rain or actually that's what it kind of seemed like all the Iowa fans were saying when it dropped around 40 degrees and the rain started pouring and they're like, "Oh, this is Iowa weather." I was like, "Guys, this is kind of what we do out in Portland too. Like when did we become so temperate, boys?"
Well, I had a conversation with Dusty Hare about that, and I was kind of like, the experience like from a weather standpoint? Now he's down on the sideline. I don't know if you're cushy in a box or something, but he's down on the sideline. He said Wisconsin was way worse than Iowa City.
Yeah, we were pretty cushy for this one. I'm not gonna lie. Like it's one of the first times I've come into a press box and seen like the closed windows for the box and been like, "Oh, thank you." And then they had like the meal was served like throughout the entire game. It was lovely. I almost put my feet up, but then you got to remember that you do run into the people like Dusty who had to weather the storm, and you have to pretend like we went through it too. Poor guy, but. Yeah, no, it was no wetter than the Wisconsin game. It might have been a little bit colder, but it wasn't that bad.
So let's dive into this game, and we'll start with kind of the hoopla before kick even happened. All of a sudden, I am not a Twitter guy, but even I was aware of the Kenyon Sadiq right tackle and Decorian Moore injuries before the game. What was it like for the team? Any kind of fans you might have run in, your perspective? Did it feel like they kind of knew this was going to happen and they were prepared, or was this kind of a shock to them as well that they weren't ready to go?
Yeah, it was a weird day on Friday. I'm not gonna lie, because that was my travel day, and I also booked my stuff late, so I had a long travel day. And it wasn't until I was rolling back to my hotel and finally got my phone fired back up that I had about 8 missed net messages and saw all the tweets of it seemed like half the roster was going to be out. And you get to the game on Saturday, and the Ducks kind of ran a little bit of a pump fake they still had Sadiq and Harkey and Devin Jackson in uniform. They did announce before the game that Decorian Moore was out. I think that was the one that obviously drew kind of the biggest amount of interest, and that's the one that kind of quasi turned out to be true because it seemed like some of the initial rumors on Friday were, oh, he's going to be lost for the season. On Saturday, Lanning said he thinks he's going to be okay. I don't know what that means timetable for this week or going into USC or Washington. But yeah, it was just it did kind of seem like it was setting up in Iowa's favor in that regard, just because you're down to going into the game 5 scholarship wide receivers, and then Gary Bryant Jr. gets injured in the second quarter, and then you're down to 4, and you're kind of looking around the field, and it's like, okay, usually in this scenario you would expect a Kenyon Sadiq to make a big play. Well, Kenyon's out too, and so considering all that, like I was really impressed with kind of just the composure and the way that the Ducks were able to kind of address this game. We've talked about how Dante in games where things aren't ideal has kind of struggled at times, and obviously he wasn't perfect in this game, but it was certainly enough in that final drive to put together one of the best throws I think I've ever seen the Oregon quarterback make on that Malik Benson completion.
Tyson, I don't know if you caught the beginning of the show. I walked into a glass door at full speed and damn near concussed myself before we started the show. And that's what this game felt like. There was a lot of just running into things the entire game. But going into this, we kind of wanted to see what the identity of Oregon was. If Iowa could pull them into deep water, how would Oregon respond? And do you feel like that the identity of this Oregon team is run ball, defense, traditional Big Ten style, like they have made the full pivot into that, and that should be their identity? Or do you think that there's something different about this team still?
What I like about this team is it can kind of morph into what it needs to be. I mean, this was a game where it wasn't ideal to be passing the football, and they had that against Wisconsin, and it looks like they might have that coming up on Friday too against Minnesota. And this has developed into one of the better rushing attacks in the country. I mean, that was the whole thing that Iowa prided itself on, right? Is we win the trenches, we're going to pound the football, we're going to make you not enjoy playing us for 4 quarters. And that's kind of what the Ducks did to them. The 261 yards, I believe, are the most they've allowed since 2022. It's the most yards per carry they've allowed since 2014. The Ducks were dominant in that phase of the game, and I think it was at the start of it, they were kind of trying things out to see like what they could get away with. I think they passed twice on that first drive, and you saw Noah Whittington drop a pass. And I think right around then the Ducks go like, okay, well, let's see what we can do on the ground. And the ground was incredibly effective. And so I think more so than the passing game, that's what the Ducks can really hang their hats on. I mean, this has been 2, 3, 4 weeks in a row where the running game's been really dominant, but again, I go back to that fourth quarter drive. They still have a pretty darn good quarterback. And yeah, I know they're pretty depleted in receivers right now, but I do like that this offense still can go and rely on the passing game to make a play or two in a game where it's pretty apparent that the running game has been what's more effective.
He's Tyson Alger, the I-5 corridor, Lookout, Eugene, Springfield. I want to switch over to the defense, and I got to be careful how I ask this question because I've been very impressed with Oregon's defense. I think it's been, especially that D-line, has been kind of the most stable part of this team throughout this season. So I got to make sure this doesn't come across as a negative, but against Penn State, against Indiana, and against Iowa, they're giving up more points in the fourth quarter than they had the first 3 quarters.
Yeah.
Do you line that up to attrition? Do you line that up to kind of the offense also kind of struggling in those 3 games? Because I'm concerned in some of these bigger games coming up, say the college football playoff is in their future, that could be a source of weakness in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, it's definitely such a kind of a Jekyll and Hyde thing because in the first 3 quarters of the game, Oregon's defense has been really good,
dominant,
and statistically they still hold up in terms of national rankings and total defensive yardage and all that. But yeah, it has kind of seemed like in the fourth quarter, especially in drives where you're like, okay, like we need to make a stop here. It seems like teams have a tendency of going like 98 yards down the field and scoring. I mean, I think that this was kind of a combination of a few things. I mean, like this was such a tough game, and like the defensive guys were hurting by the end of it. I asked Bryce Betcher after the game, like, well, what does it feel like trying to tackle Mark Gronowski for 4 straight quarters? And he's like, I'm not going to lie, guys, like I'm hurting right now. Like it's a bear trying to wrestle that 235-pound quarterback down to the turf. But it's just, they're pretty good at getting guys to other teams to third down, but then it just seems like some of the big play conversion rates for the other team's offenses in key scenarios is pretty concerning. And so, I would like to be able to judge that in a game where Oregon's offense is humming in the second half and they're not just constantly giving the ball away and putting the defense in those pressure scenarios. But that is kind of like the one big kind of concern for this team is we've seen the offense now make plays in drives where they've absolutely needed to, but we kind of need to see the defense do that as well, especially as you're going to be facing some of these pretty higher potent offenses in USC and Washington here in the coming weeks.
Tyson, it's a stupid question, but it's one that we've kind of gone back and forth. Is this the best win of the season for the Ducks?
Probably. I mean, like in retrospect, probably. Like I'm still having to like battle between what my eyes saw at Penn State and what's happened since then, because I still think that was a really good Penn State football team, and I thought that was a great game of football, and I loved the way that Oregon clutched up in there. And so like I still want to say that was the best win of the season, but it's kind of hard to do that when the coach who game planned against you is golfing currently. So I think that was probably the best one. I mean, just considering it seemed like a lot of the country was trending towards Iowa in that game, and it was kind of a prove-it game for the Ducks. This isn't one that come playoff time is going to be, held on an altar and said like, oh, look at this massive quality win the Ducks had against Iowa. But it was one of those ones where I think people thought they might not have won, and they proved them wrong. And so I think that was a really quality victory for them.
I don't know. Where do we start on this? A Friday night game. Are they really that weird, or is this one of those stupid questions we ask interviewers to pretend like it's an edge that somebody's got?
I think it's probably more weird for fans than anybody else, or even us media members. Like, what time do I hit the road Friday, guys? Like traffic's already bad enough on Fridays around here. Like, is this a 10 a.m. departure?
Andy Dirt Johnson's leaving at 10 a.m.
You know what? As I've always followed the advice of, what would dirt do? So,
And that's gotten you real far in life. Real
yeah,
far in life.
it's gotten me right on this radio show. I think, probably the only big issue for the Ducks here is just recovery from injury. We don't quite know where Gary Bryant Jr. is at. I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to hold DeCorian out for this game. Short week. Minnesota's coming off a bye, so they've obviously had some time to prepare for this one. But I think it's a lot better than some of those Thursday ones that we had. What was that? Probably about a decade or so ago. Like I think Friday's manageable at the very least.
I don't want to dive too deep into this game, but what problems in Minnesota are they going to present? Because defensively, they're pretty stout. They're a top 30 unit by basically every metric. Offensively, they're not. So is this? They can't drag you really into the water like Iowa can, but if you're Oregon, you have to at least look at that Iowa game and go, if we do get into this, we're gonna be fine, right?
Yeah, I think so. Minnesota's not bad. They're 6-3, but guess where all three of those losses have come? They've come away from Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So, and by the way, I didn't mean to slip into like a Minnesota there. Like
I heard it.
I'm getting festive for the game. Okay.
Don't you know?
They're a pretty one-dimensional offense. They pass the ball pretty well. They're not a great rushing team, and so I think that this is a game that actually matches up pretty well for the Ducks. Oregon's a very good pass defense. It's not setting up for weather for being a great passing game either. And the Gophers just aren't that good at rushing the ball. I think that this is one of those games where if Oregon decides that, hey, we want to just kind of do the bully ball and establish ourselves on the ground. Yeah, Minnesota's not that bad against the run defensively, but they're not Iowa. I think that this is just a game where Oregon is better kind of in both facets of how you want to win it. And I just don't think Minnesota has enough firepower to keep up with the Ducks in this one.
Yeah, I'm curious how behind the scenes Lanning might approach this, because I think one thing that's been very fortunate for the Ducks is throughout the season is they've run into a lot of different teams that they've kind of had to show different identities, as we love to talk about on this show. If they've got a team that can't really run the ball well, but is kind of a throwing, how much defense are you looking at as a setup for the USC game? Because USC is going to throw the football. And if you're playing a team that's one-dimensional but can throw the ball a little bit, how much are you just, let's play this game, get out of here, or can we test some things that we might want to run against the pass-happy team in 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, like there might be some trial and error there too, and I think again a lot of it will depend on what sort of weather we actually get on Friday. But I think this will be a nice kind of like gradual increase into facing USC next week. Because if you look back at kind of the games Oregon's defense has had to play the last couple of weeks, they played against Iowa, who doesn't pass the football well. They played against Wisconsin, who doesn't pass the football well. I think this will be kind of a nice warm-up lap before facing two very good offensive teams the next couple of weeks, because the Ducks just haven't seen those the last 2 weeks of the season.
Not to put the cart before the horse, Harris and I were talking about this leading into the conversation with you about college football playoff and where Oregon is at right now, the 8-9 matchup with Notre Dame. I'm of the belief that even if Oregon loses to USC and USC and Oregon end up finishing both 10-2, Indiana, Ohio State, one of those is going to have one loss. Those four teams would make it in. Do you look at Oregon that they have to win out to make the college football playoff, or can they take one more loss and be in there?
I don't know, and I know that's not the answer that you guys want from us, but the committee's kind of shown that it doesn't respect Oregon in the same way that it respects the other one-loss teams right now. And then there are just a bunch of other two-loss teams out there. But again, those two-loss teams are going to start accumulating losses as well here as we go through the final 2-3 weeks of the season. And if it comes down to kind of like a bubble scenario, we'll have to see. We haven't had the committee really have to like make a decision on a big brand name Big Ten team like that yet. And so I think that the Ducks are attractive enough if you want to go from if they're considering eyeballs and notoriety of the teams they want in there. But I think it would be a lot easier if they just won these next two games and they didn't have to worry about it, because USC and Washington, yeah, they're Big Ten teams, and they were decent Pac-12 teams during their day, but like they haven't been kind of relevant in this in the last year or two. And so I don't know how much extra credit the Ducks are going to be getting with these wins either. So I think it hurts way more when they lose.
He's Tyson Alger, the I-5 corridor. Look out, Eugene Springfield. We'll finish up with this. I'm not the biggest. I don't love trying to discuss why the committee makes the decisions they make because I think half these games they're not even watching. And I'm with you. I don't think they gave Oregon enough respect. But I live in a world in my brain, so I try to just have kind of fun with some of these matchups. Since the playoff situation is going to change week after week after week, just indulge me a little bit. I do believe Oregon wins out. And I do believe the committee will continue to view them the same way they do now, despite a win against Iowa, which would be a win against a USC team that's ranked and a UW team that's a fringe-ranked team. I think this collision course with Notre Dame is an absolute fact, and that is going to happen. Can we live in a fun world right now? How wild would the Golden Domers coming to Autzen be for a playoff game?
Like the Ducks would have to go mirrored helmets too, right? Like just
You'd
to
have
have
to.
like the flashiest. That would be so fun, wouldn't it? Like I know if you're a coach, you probably want a top seed and to get that bye, even though what happened last year with the byes. But just the idea of before Christmas hosting a home playoff game and having that type of brand of a team coming into Autzen and what would be probably an excellent game of football. Like I wouldn't be upset about that, guys. Like I wouldn't mind writing about that one if I had to. So.
Oh shucks.
Yeah.
Oh dang it. I know I texted Dirt last night about that, and he said things that I can't say on the radio in his excitement about that potential matchup. Go ahead and pump your brand, amigo. What you writing this week?
Let's see here. We're writing just a lot of football this week, guys. Kind of the short week has us scrambling a bit. So we have our game preview coming out tomorrow. We'll be at Autzen on Friday, and then next week I have a little story where I talked to Oregon backup quarterback Brock Thomas about a superstar Little League team that he was on back in the day that had like 6 kids end up going D1. So yeah, just a little remember when. So.
Great. Well, he's Tyson Alger, the I-5 corridor. Look out, Eugene Springfield. Go check out his work on any platform that you can find him on. We appreciate you. As always, my friend, enjoy the game on Friday and have a nice long weekend.
Hey, thanks a lot, boys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tyson.
Yep, that is Tyson Alger. He joins us every single Wednesday at 10:30 for a couple seggies as we put a bow on Oregon's win against Iowa, walking into Minnesota this Friday. Once again, you can catch that right here on The Fan. Pregame will start at 2 with Andy Dirt Johnson, Anthony Newman, and Dusty Hara live from Autzen Stadium.